Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 edition of the Hausa International Book and Arts Festival. For this edition, we are discussing on the panel Kannywood and Hausa popular culture. My name is Sada Malumfashi, and I'll be moderating this conversation with Dr. Muhsin Ibrahim, as well as Dr. Carmen Makin. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and start maybe with a very introductory question. Maybe I'll start with Dr. Mohsin and then follow up with Dr. Carmen. For viewers that are listening, maybe just give us your input on what Kannywood means to you, as well as the work you do as it relates to Kannywood itself.
Thank you once again for having me. Kannywood film industry means a lot to me for several reasons. First, as an academic, when we were employed at the Department of Theatre and English and Literary Studies, we were paired with professors who work on different areas of study. For example, for me, it was Professor Muhammad Obadamus, who works on theater and performing arts. So during one of our first meetings with him, we spoke about the fact that theater and drama are some things of the past, in the sense like who goes to theater to watch drama performances? Very few people. So he said, why not study film? Why not follow this transition from stage to screen? I said, why not? Since before I joined academia, I've been very much passionate about film. Although I never thought of acting, but studying the film and following the film industry activities. So I gladly welcome the idea of, looking at Kannywood from academic point of view. So that is the beginning of my academic interest in the studies of Kannywood. And since then, I have never regretted my decision to study Kannywood. I did some works in Nigeria on Kannywood. Later on, I went to India for my master's degree. I also looked at Kannywood, partially at least. And subsequently, I even did my PhD in the same film industry by and large. And today I have students studying Kannywood, and some of them even got their articles published by renowned publishers. So I think Kannywood means so much to me from academic point of view, as also as a person, and Hausa person from Kano, that is epicenter of Kannywood, and so much more. Let me not take much time talking about this. Back to you, Malam Sada.
I guess Sada, you're muted. But would you like me to go ahead?
That's a great intro. Yeah, I was just going to pose the same question to you, Carmen.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I think Kannywood. I fell in love with Kannywood alongside the language and the literature. I think it was something that was very unexpected. I grew up in Jos, and I was doing my PhD at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the Department of African Languages and Literature at the time, and I was planning to write on Nigerian literature, like contemporary Nigerian literature in English. And I really didn't have much interest in Hausa, but one of the requirements of the PhD program was that we had to be proficient in African language. I already spoke some Hausa, like Jos Hausa and Akwana, just market Hausa. And so I was like, well, Hausa would be the easiest, so let me continue with that. And I got in touch with Malami Buba, who had been at SOAS, University of London, for a long time, and had gone back to Usman Namfodio University, and had started a little study abroad program for students. And so when I was there, he started having me read Hausa novels, and I would go. This was in 2024 or 2025. So I would just go to one of these video rental shops and like rent VHS tapes just to learn Hausa. And in the process, I just kind of fell in love with just the narratives themselves, the stories. And then at the end of that time with Malami Bubuan Sokoto, he took me to Kano. I met Ado Ohamegira Debino and Abdallah Uba Adamu and other people who've been really so kind and helpful to me. So after that, I went to Kano in 2006 and ended up going to Association of Nigerian Author meetings. And while there, also meeting people who were also producing films like Mohamed Balar Besango. And he invited me to his office where he was also making films. And I met Abbas Sadiq there, who had made a film Al-Bashi that I had watched in Sokoto. And I'd been so fascinated by it. I'd written a paper on it that ended up becoming my first publication. So I was a bit starstruck when I met him. And so that was kind of how, like, he was like, oh, okay, you need to do some things in film. So that was kind of how I entered. I was more interested in literature originally, but what I ended up doing during my research ended up mostly being film. So I think Kannywood, to me, I just find it so exciting, and the story's so compelling. So obviously, I'm not a Hausa person originally. I came from the outside, but I think it was through Kannywood and through Hausa literature that I fell in love with the language and the culture altogether. So that's kind of, and also, people sometimes ask me, how did I learn Hausa? And it's really, unfortunately, as a university person, I would like to say through the university, but it wasn't. It was Kannywood, because I was sitting in studios with people, on film sets with people, and people, they didn't have time to sit down and like pamper me and talk to me in English. So I had to learn Hausa. So I feel like, everything about my experience in northern Nigeria with Hausa, I owe to Kannywood. So that's the short story.
Interesting. You are muted, Sada.
Yeah, I was saying that gives me a lot of insight to move into the next segment of questions. With the Hausa International Book and Art Festival this year, the theme is the popular culture. So we leaned a lot into the film industry as a form of arts, as a form of literature itself. A lot of the movies initially started from the Soyeya novels themselves. The books led to a certain extent to a lot of boom in Kannywood movies. So we were sharing a lot of old Kannywood videos on social media, and then one that was popular, of course, it's you, Carmen, featuring with the late Ibro. I know everybody asked you this question, but you
get
still
away from that.
What was fascinating is you mentioning that how film was an introduction. It was a best way for you to just being in that situation to learn Hausa, but just also take us back into that period for a brief period where you are yourself a Kannywood actress, which forever will be part of your IMDb bio.
I show that to my students. Almost
I can't get away from it. People will find it on YouTube forever. Yes. Well, I think I was starstruck when I first met Abbas Sadiq, because I had been watching this film Al-Bashi so much, and I found it so interesting. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but kind of there's like a reversal of gender politics and so on. So having watched this person so much and not really having had much to do with film, I was starstruck. And so then he was like, oh, we need to put you in some films. So that was in 2005, 2006, where I think it was just like these little walk-on parts. I can't even remember the names there were 2 or 3 films that year. It was, but one was 4192. And then I think I had another friend from the US who was doing an anthropology research there, and I dragged her into it. And so there are the 2 of us in that. And then I went back to the US. I had to finish my prelims, my PhD exams. And so I came back in 2008, and that's when the censorship crisis had started after the scandal. So I wasn't on as many sets then, but people were still doing things out of state. So I think, yeah, I was just doing a few, and then someone came to me with the idea of Ibro ya Aure Baturia. I thought it was funny. And I said, yes, if I can interview Ibro. So that was my condition. And we went to Jigawa State because that was during the censorship crisis. They didn't want to shoot. So I was a bit traumatized by that shoot, in part because I witnessed firsthand Chamama, like a whole film being shot in a day or two. And so I did get to interview Ibro very briefly during our lunch for like 5 minutes. It wasn't a very satisfying interview, but I was grateful for it. But I mean, there would be things like they tell me, okay, change. I was in Nigerian clothes. They told me, okay, change into your English wears. And then like 30 seconds later, that come. And I had no experience. And of course, Ibro has been acting for many years and was brilliant at improvising. So like I was basically just following his lead. But if I seem like I don't know what I'm doing, I mean, that was kind of partly what the film was about too. But it's very much because there was no script, there was no prep time. My hair was all over the place because there was no time to comb it or anything. So that that was it was fun. It was but I was embarrassed too because it was like, oh no, this is how many people are going to see this, and everyone did, and everyone still does. So
I can even remember the lines. Catch me.
Well, the other thing was they wanted me to speak like I didn't speak Hausa well. So, I mean, my Hausa still isn't perfect, but it was better than what it sounds like in that film because I was supposed to be this new person. So yes. After that, then Nazir Gwangwazo said, "Oh, you're going to get typecast as a Chimama actress." So then that's when I did Mutalab, and I think that I liked that experience much better because there was time to rehearse and there was a script to study, and so and Johnny, there were a few others after that, but it was fun, and I really loved how acting allows that kind of creativity in you. So I would have loved to have done more with it if I weren't in a PhD program then. Yeah.
So any potential producer can still
Yeah, that's a great insight. She mentioned two things in there. I wanted maybe Mohsin to come into specifically for those that might not know, just to give us an overview of what Kannywood entails in terms of what Chamama is and what the regular Kannywood is. Maybe Dr. Mohsin, you could give us a bit of insight into what differences those two kind of genres are in Kannywood.
Okay. Well, maybe I shall expand it a bit more because there are more than two genres. First, she mentioned Chamama, which was pioneered by late Rabilu Musa Ibro and his friends, mostly based in Wudil and other places. The films are called, I think, cheap and cheerful. Mostly they are not scripted. The actors are not A-list actors. And yeah, just for fun, actually. A lot of improvisations, a minimal set, and so on and so forth, just for people to love. The stories mostly revolve around the character of Dan Ibro this, Ibro that. For example, in the one Dr. Kamin featured in, Ibro ya aure Baturia, Ibro marries a white woman. There are others, Ibro Michael Jackson, Ibro Likitan Ebola, Ibro Osama bin Laden, Ibro Eberson. Yeah, that is Chamama for you. And the other one is, I think, called Sentimental, led by the likes of Alinuhu, whose stories are mostly about love triangles, forced marriage. That is Auran Dole and Soheya Dole. And they are a lot like Indian films. Yeah, very melodramatic. Yeah, with singing and dancing, and beautiful locations and so on and so forth. They are mostly scripted. The actors are well known, mostly youth, not elderly. But there are other types, if I remember correctly. And we have artistic filmmakers, right, Carmen? Am I getting
Yeah, and
the
you know,
numbers?
when I've most recently asked filmmakers about that Chimama sentimental thing, and they said, oh, that's gone now, right? There isn't that kind of division anymore. I don't know if you would agree with that, being a little bit more up to date than I am.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I think BBC Hausa had an interview with me. I said there are still Chamama productions. You can see them in form of skits. Yeah,
Okay.
not a
Yeah.
feature-length films. Yeah, in form of skits, led nowadays by this Musa Mai Sana'a. Productions are largely Chamama and so on. So then we have artistic filmmakers whose films is somehow in between Chamama and the so-called sentimental, because they have song and dance routine in their films, but they are meaningful, so to say. They contextualize their song and dance routines in such a way. We call them films masu ma'ana, and they try their best to not like go beyond cultural boundaries, so to call them. Yeah, they don't dance like you see in the sentimental films. And they are mostly led by the like older members of the film industry. For example, this what is his name again? Oh my god, the name escapes me. Yeah, they even the films by for example Ian Tama, maybe.
I miss you, Antema. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they are sort of artistic films. And my God, Alhaji Abdul Karim, Moving Image. Yeah, I remember the name. Yeah, and the rest of them. And according to Professor Abdullah, if I remember, he adds the fourth genre in Kannywood. The films produced by non-Hausa, some of whom even non-Muslim, but they produced films set in northern Nigeria, and sometimes in Hausa, sometimes in English. For example, this film Hamza, yeah, it is in English but set in ancient northern Nigerian Hausa setting. It features actors from the south. Maybe this one also you can add.
Hamza?
Hamza.
Was that was the one about it was a 3-part like royal family that had Ali Nuhu.
Yeah, it has Alinu and
Kannywood. Yeah, they were Kannywood actors, but it was in English.
Yeah, but the producers are not Hausa people.
Actually, I think I spoke, if I'm remembering the right film, there was a producer in Abuja who was Hausa, who had been producing that film, and he said in an interview with me that he wanted to produce it so that the South could see the culture, and he wanted to do it in English so that the South could see the culture of.
But this genre has been expanded as well. Nowadays we have Up North. You know Up North?
Yeah.
It's on Netflix. We have
and Milkmaid.
Pardon?
The Milkmaid.
Which title did you mention?
Milkmaid. That was the one that was submitted for the Oscars a couple of years ago.
Exactly.
And Voiceless.
Voiceless.
Those were I was never able to access the Milkmaid on Netflix, but Voiceless.
Yeah, it is not on Netflix yet. Yeah.
The Voiceless was on the American Netflix for a while.
Okay.
And I think I heard Milkmaid was on Amazon Prime for a while, but I was never able to access it.
Okay, I have not watched the film yet, but it's
actually ask, maybe speak still on this. This Milkmaid, the one that was submitted this year also for Oscar consideration. How do we still call that Kannywood? Does the mainstream Kannywood accept those films also as Kannywood?
Let Carmen say.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the name of this one that was. So, I mean, in my opinion, probably they're not accepted by the Kannywood filmmakers as Kannywood, but they are still Hausa films, right? And a lot of them have Hausa actors as well. So, like in The Milkmaid, really brilliant performance by Mariam Booth. I think even more than the main actress. So. And then there are a few others. So in all of these films, there are some Kannywood actors who are really, I think there's some of the best performances in the films. So And then there was one called Zat Ben Halima that was
Mhm.
part of African Folktales Retold on Netflix. That is really lovely. It's just a 20-minute film, but I teach it, and just really beautifully done. I think Umar Gombe is in that one. Sani Mwazo. The Sani Mwazo, I think, is interesting. I think a lot of times the Joss actors kind of can move both north and south, and people like Ali Nuhu as well, and Rahma Sadal, who are doing things in Nollywood in English and in Kannywood, and then also in these kind of Hausa films made by people who aren't necessarily from the Kannywood people.
Yeah, so my opinion regarding this, whether those films can be called Kannywood, I can say I have a specific definition of what makes a film Kannywood and what makes a film non-Kannywood. But overall, some of the founding members of the film industry, I don't want to mention names here, they reject any film made even with Hausa actors. But if it is not by Hausa producers, or if it is not in Hausa, they say these films are not are not Kannywood. The first time BBC Hausa asked me to write about the so-called top 10 films of Kannywood of the year, maybe 2017 or 18, I included There's a Way by Jammaji. Not only some Kannywood filmmakers, but even the audience, at least under my page on Facebook, rejected inclusion of There Is a Way as a Kannywood production. Just imagine, the actors are Kannywood members. The setting, the producers, like everyone, only the language is not Hausa. So this is one. Two, films like Hamza, like Up North, with a combination of actors from the South and the North. Some people reject them as well as non-Kannywood productions. But you imagine, why do they accept that Ibro, like Ibro productions, like Karangia? You remember Karangia, one of the best Ibro films. Karangia it also has a non-Kannywood actors in the film.
Is that the one with Patient Ozoko and Aki Ampopo?
Aki Ampopo, exactly.
I think Kenneth Gyang was involved in that one.
Pardon?
I think Kenneth Gyang, it was either director
again, exactly. He's the lead director, and another director was this guy, names are escaping me, Alugumzak, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Alugumzak. So it's just, I don't know, there is no criteria clearly defined which says this production is Kannywood and that production is not a Kannywood. It all depends on people's bias. Yeah, some will say this is Kannywood, others will say this is Kannywood. So maybe we need to define, maybe scholars or the filmmakers themselves, or I don't know whose responsibility it is to say.
I guess, I mean, I would think Kannywood films are made by, like, I guess maybe the directors and the producers have, you know, are the ones that are making other films in Hausa. But I think you're right. It is, I'm trying to, it's terrible. I'm trying to remember the name of the director, but there was a director in Kano who'd actually studied in Burkina Faso for a while. And he was actually making Christian church films in Hausa, even though he himself was Muslim, and he made other Kannywood films too. So I think there's always been a little bit of flexibility in what sort of films were made. So I guess and someone like Kenneth Gyang, right? He's from Jos. He's not Hausa, but he speaks Hausa. He made Blood and Henna, which I think was nominated for the AMA Awards, like 6 different nominations that didn't get anything. But especially people from Jos, they are people who speak Hausa and who make Hausa cultural productions. And so the question, I mean, I guess the problem with Kannywood is that Kano is in the title. And so it just kind of assumes that it's those people who are mostly practicing in Kano. But the Kaduna people and the Jos people are also included in that. So I think there's always problems in terminology.
The name Kannywood, I think, is not very problematic. For example, we have Bollywood. And some productions we consider Indian or Bollywood productions are not actually produced in the northern India or Mumbai. of today. Yeah, but they are all grouped as Bollywood
Yeah, but
productions.
they would have issues with that, right? Like the Tamil filmmakers don't like being called Bollywood.
Yeah, they don't.
So, and I think the same thing for a while, people are in Kaduna were saying Kaduna Wood or Kannywood.
Yeah, Kannywood. They tried Kannywood, Josswood, even Kannywood. Something my wife and I laugh at every time. Kannywood. But I think in the end they can't escape Kanu. Issue of calling a production Kannywood or non-Kannywood reminds me of Arewa 24 Productions. Yeah, where do we place their productions? Like Kwana Chasa'in, to me, I consider it the best Hausa series ever. But can we call it a Kannywood production? Most of the actors, even the producers, I mean the lead director, Bozi.
And the writers too, right? Like
the writers too.
Fauzia, Suleiman. So
Fauzia, Suleiman, and the rest of them. So it's just, I don't know. To me, it's hard to say this is Kannywood, but overall, if the actors and producers and the subject matter all look like or are like Kannywood mainstream production, then I call it Kannywood. But you can add maybe caveats that this is produced by, some sort of explanation to add to the understanding of your readers or viewers about what you are talking about. But I don't have problem with the title, with the name Kannywood. Even Professor Abdullah Obadamu has some issue with the name Kannywood. He argues that nowadays Hausa films have been produced not only within Nigeria but outside Nigeria by Ghanaian filmmakers, Nigerian filmmakers, and they use Hausa and we call them Kannywood. They are not only in northern Nigeria or Nigeria but outside the country. Is it fair to call their productions Kannywood just because they use a language Kannywood is known for using? So the argument I presented the paper on his behalf some 2 or 3 years ago during Kilap conference, and it generated debate. In the end, there was no consensus on what is the best name to call Hausa films. He said, I think, if I remember correctly, Hausa cinema instead of Kannywood. So the argument goes on. But I mean,
it's like the Nollywood argument. I think, as scholars, I think it is good to maybe, say Hausa cinema or Hausa film to be more specific. But at the same time, are scholars really going to change what everyone calls it? Like, what Film Magazine and the newspapers and everything. So it's gotten that name. I do think that, like, we can problematize it in scholarship, but ultimately, does it really make a difference? I guess it would make a difference in how it becomes publicized. So if filmmakers don't like it, that directors who are not from the Kannywood elite in Kano are called that, then that could be an issue. But
so, as I said, the argument continues.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I was just thinking about it myself. I knew I grew up watching films, Hausa films. You go and rent them, the VHS, and as a watcher, we never call it Kannywood. It's Hausa film. Wasannin kwaikwayo, Kano films sometimes, or when Kaduna came into the conversation also with Wasila, then you could feel that distinct change in that, this is a Kaduna made movie. If Galimoni is singing, the singer you could distinguish where that film is coming from. If it's from Jos, from the tonality of their Hausa, you could distinguish. So what Carmen said, it's quite interesting in that for those that actually watch these movies, they do not actually call it Kannywood. It's more of a scholarlistic as well as an industry name in terms of giving it hype to rival Nollywood, to rival Bollywood, most likely to rival Hollywood. So I'm thinking of now also the popular culture itself, how these films have shaped perception and changed perception. One thing that we mentioned earlier was Ibro, despite the low budget kind of movie, he's one actor that basically influenced culture and society. Sometimes there's the movie I can remember. Is it Ibro Bowel? There's this cloth that he wore had round patterns, and then people stopped wearing it because Ibro condemned it in a certain movie. So I'm thinking of the influence this Hausa film industry or Hausa films or Kannywood in general has on society. So I would want to know your take, how you've be able to look at the industry itself, the movies, as well as influence on popular culture and change in popular culture in the society. Maybe I'll start with Dr. Carmen.
The influence of Hausa films on society.
Yes, and culture generally, and how they affect culture.
Yeah. So Dr. Musa may be better than me at that, but because my whole like experience of Hausa culture and society is through Kannywood. So even the people that I was spending time with, so I may be a bit kind of biased in terms of, because I know there are quite a few people who felt like, you know, Hausa films are spoiling society or they're not correctly representing. And I can't say too much about that because I'm not a Hausa person who's grown up in Kano, right? But I do think as far as kind of the influence, I think Niger speaks Hausa, but I heard that there are people in Niger who didn't, who speak Zabarma or something else, who are learning Hausa so that they could watch Hausa films. The same thing with the novels, right? That there were people learning how to read and write in Roman scripts so that they could read the novels. And so I think, and just in my own story being attracted to this, I think it's the Hausa films that attract people who may not necessarily be Hausa themselves to wanting to speak or learn Hausa. As you know, I think just like even the skits and everything, I think they have a lot of influence on society. So I could probably say more, but I'm interested in what hearing Musin says.
Okay,
yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, honestly speaking, Hausa film has an enormous influence on the Hausa community, global Hausa community. The argument that the film corrupts culture, and this is also like the argument, the chicken and egg argument, yeah, which influences which. It has been around in film studies for a very, very long time. I think the argument is between the cultural determinism and technological determinism, which influences which. What happens in the society influences what the filmmakers do, or what the filmmakers do influences what happens in the society. Especially with the recent pawn snatching, pawn robbery in Kano. They said the influence, what the likes of Abali and the rest do in film influence nowadays young men to snatch pawns from unsuspecting innocent people and so on and so on. But overall, I agree. Kannywood influences how people view Hausa, what people think of Hausa people. For example, in my PhD research, one of the things I looked at is how Kannywood has, if you like, elevated the position of Hausa as a language. In the sense, people are not only learning Hausa learning Hausa through film, like Carmen did, or polishing their Hausa linguistic skills through film, but some force themselves to learn the language to feature in Hausa films. Yeah. Which, if you like, has made Hausa a commercial commodity. Yeah, where learning it or learning a particular variety, yeah, helps you feature in film and so on. For example, Hadiza Gabon, although she has Nigerian roots, but was not born and raised in Nigeria, she had to learn Hausa to feature in film. As this Amal, there's one young lady from Cameroon, Amal, many others. Yeah, and also particular variety of Hausa, Sokotanchi, or the Hausa spoken by the likes of Babam Milika. Is it Babam Milika? Yeah. And what is his name again? Baban Chinidu, and the rest of them. Yeah. So overall, and look at the followers also they have, these Hausa filmmakers on social media, and how they influence trends. I was in Kano recently, is it last year or this year? This year, I saw people wearing a particular type of cap. Asked how? They said it is called Rabagardama. If anyone watches Labarina, he knows a particular character in the film wears one particular hat like this, and it became a trend. Yeah, when Rahma Sadao sang Raria Raria, the clothes she wears in the song also becomes trendy. So in many ways, also film is, exerts a massive influence on Hausa speakers, on Hausa community in northern Nigeria and beyond. So there's no question about the argument. But the issue of corrupting, which one corrupts which, I don't know. Yeah, as I said, it's like the argument between of chicken and egg. So I don't know if I have answered the question correctly.
I think to add to that too, I mean, I think there's just it's obvious that it has kind of spread Hausa in some ways, including you mentioned Ghanaian Hausa films where people speak Hausa. I met a producer once in Kano who would come to Kano seeking out Kannywood stars to put in Ghanaian films, but teaching it. So as I've taught Ali Nuhu's Maria. And the first time I taught it, there were students from Somalia and from Tanzania, and they loved the film. They loved it so much. And I was like, oh, this is a real, like, this could be a whole market opportunity if things were dubbed or subtitles in Swahili or Somali, that could open up a whole new kind of Pan-African market, because they recognize the sorts of stories and the situations that African Muslims, whether in West Africa, they're quite similar to some of the stories of their own families. So that might be a little bit more aspirational, but I think Hausa could potentially have, and through, I think, the Africa Magic Hausa, there are people in other parts of the continent. I think someone in the Congo who I had known in Jos contacted me and he was watching Africa Magic Hausa. So the influence goes beyond areas where Hausa is normally spoken, and kind of
exactly. For example, I have students who I mentioned earlier are deeply in love with Kannywood production, despite its problems here and there, but they can relate. They find the stories quite relatable in some way. And I said it several times. Nowadays, people don't read as much as they watch. Yeah, motion picture. So if you teach literature, I don't teach literature. I don't know if your students really read the text you recommend them to do. Yeah, it's hard.
They don't.
It's hard. It's getting harder even. Yeah, every day. So what people see in Kannywood in production tells a lot about how they perceive how Hausa people are. Yeah. So some may not have direct contact with Hausa people. So all they know, like we've known, let's say, Indian films or American Indian people and American people, for example, through Bollywood and Hollywood. So it's almost the same thing. Yeah. The way, if we make our the Kannywood production better, that's how people will see Hausa people and see Hausa people. It reminds me of an argument presented to me by one of the Kannywood producers. He said he will not make a film. The censor board will not dictate how he makes his film, because he knows Hausa people. He is Hausa and he has studied Hausa. So somebody who has, our people, questionable Hausa identity cannot dictate how he interprets Hausa story. Yeah. in his own film. Therefore, they can argue, they can tell him to go and cut this and cut that, but in the end, he will make it the way he wants, even if they will sanction him. And I think that is what he does. So that film has a lot. It tells a lot about it. It's the people, yeah, Hausa people. They will not show us as heartless, as careless, as ignorant, and this and that. So that is because it's of the importance of how people are seen in their films. So I think there's no question about that. As I said, Hausa film is very influential in how people view Hausa and how people interact with Hausa people. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Musa. I think we are shooting right on time. So I think this might be a perfect place to just round up this conversation. It's just been brilliant speaking with experts. This is the Hausa International Book and Arts Festival, and we've had a conversation on Kannywood and Hausa popular culture. Thank you, Dr. Carmen, for joining this conversation, and we'll see you, of course, tomorrow at the in-person session. Thank you, Dr. Musin, for joining all the way from Chicago. I know it's really early. We really appreciate you joining in. We hope to see you in person maybe someday at the Hausa International Book and Arts Festival. We really appreciate you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having us.